Very much. And I missed introductions. I'm Karen McPherson. I'm the MLA for Calgary McKay-Nose Hill, and it's lovely to see all women at the head of the table here. And it looks like you all got the same memo too. You're pretty well coordinated. So on page 95 of the business plan, in the overview, infrastructure provides innovative, high quality and well-designed public infrastructure for Albertans. Can you give me some examples of innovation in planning or implementation of infrastructure in recent projects?
So, okay, sorry, take me back to the page you're looking at here.
95 of the business plan. It's right near the beginning. It's the ministry overview.
So, you know, one of the things that we're constantly looking at in infrastructure is how to be more innovative in how we work. One of the areas that we find that we enjoy doing the most is, of course, in terms of energy efficiency and those pieces. So when we look at how diverse we need to be on our infrastructure build, we look at the idea of making sure that we have we're up to date on our environmental standards and not just up to date but pushing the envelope there and really ensuring Alberta's a diverse range of needs in terms of policies that integrate diversity and inclusion. So I know that's an area that you are particularly interested in. We have instituted gender-based analysis as a greater understanding of our clients' needs, and so we think that's pretty innovative in the work we do. We have GBA Plus and supporting a lot of the projects we do. That's especially important when we look at projects that we do in areas like Indigenous communities. So we have some projects that we've attached that lens to, including the courthouse renewal, courthouses that are being built in the Dene First Nations and Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation. We have our Peerless Trout First Nation schools. We're going to deliver a new K-8 school at Peerless Lake and a new K-12 school at Trout Lake. And when we're doing those with consultation and using that GBA Plus and that lens through which we examine those projects. So that's one good piece of innovation. You know, we think that certainly when we look at how we view everything from construction tendering to procurement to policies and methods, we're always looking at how we can be forward thinking and innovative.
Okay, so are there any examples where you're integrating a number of different services into one building? So a school that also has a community library or a senior center or community center integrated into it. Are there any examples like that you have?
I think we do have a few.
I think there was a school example. I just can't recall the name.
Okay, so one of the interesting things about that, I know when we had talked about scope changes on schools and things, so, in one case, the community had actually sat down and said, we'd really like to see a bit of a scope change on the school, and I think they were including a community center in that. We know in Banff, the town of Banff has committed up to $1.7 million for a total of more than 500 additional square meters within the second phase of Banff Elementary School. And they did that change to provide an additional area for an out-of-school club. Okay. So that's one area where they added a gymnasium expansion, some supplemental gymnasium infrastructure related to it. We know that in the Golden Hills School Division, they attached an additional 5,800 square meters for a field house. And again, that incorporated a school gymnasium, a public gymnasium. So that was available to the public, which is pretty great when you have a school that that the public can flow through, which is great for a community when you know that you have an additional use in the after hours because the kids are in school for only a certain number of hours a day. They also added a running track and a sports field in order to get more maximum use of the space. So we're finding that with schools. we're having a lot of conversations with communities, and they're really wanting to see an expanded use from their schools, and we want to sit down and have those conversations with them, because certainly when you take a school build and you add facilities in there that are available to the public too, you really maximize the use.
Great, thanks very much. You touched on two things that I want to follow up on. The first one, you talked about energy efficiency, and on page 97, the key strategy 2.3, examine opportunities to implement environmental efficiencies, green technologies, and the reduction of the environmental footprint of provincial infrastructure. So there's no performance measure related to LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, building rating system. Why is that?
So actually all of our facilities are built to LEED Silver.
Oh, okay.
And that is a constant in infrastructure.
So but that's not one of your measures that you've included in the budget information. Maybe stick that in there next year.
Sure. You know, one of the things I think when we look at LEED and we look at those other projects, certainly our target is on government buildings to be 29% better than the National Energy Code for offices and 22% better than the National Energy Code for schools. But certainly take your point, is probably worth including in the material we put out.
Great, thanks. So something that I've noticed, and I don't go into a lot of government buildings, just a couple here, but there aren't a lot of recycling opportunities for things like compostables or plastics. I find I drag a lot of plastic recyclables home with me. And if we're in the cafeteria over at the legislature, we are not composting any food waste over there. There's a lot of materials used that aren't reusable. There's a lot of packaging. So I'm wondering, do you understand how much across the provincial buildings, how much edible food is thrown out as waste that could be composted, and how much food that is still usable is being thrown out instead of being redistributed to people who might be able to use it?
Well, certainly those are great questions, and I think my ministry staff is making a note to mark those down. Okay. Certainly it's a bit of a challenge to find a way to measure that. We have more than 1,500 provincial buildings around the province, but certainly to make a start on it in some place like Edmonton and Calgary is a terrific idea.
Great, thanks. And then you also alluded to GBA Plus,
right,
as
a lens.
Yes, exactly. So on page 95, the strategic context is advancing gender equality as a priority. Infrastructure is integrating GBA Plus across the ministry to ensure its engagement processes, policies, programs, and initiatives support gender equality, diversity, and inclusion of Alberta's population, including Indigenous communities. So something that I've noticed in all of the estimates that I've read so far is the ministries are speaking about a center of responsibility, but the infrastructure is the only one that didn't mention that in their document. So I'm wondering, and I had trouble trying to understand or ascertain if the center of responsibility lies within each ministry or if it lies within the status of women ministry. And I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit for your ministry in particular.
Well, certainly it's very important to me, and it has been for a number of years. And so the GBA Plus working group was established within our government with representatives from every ministry. So certainly we have folks from infrastructure at the table and have been right from the beginning. So as part of that working group, our folks in infrastructure are at the table as we develop tools and training modules and work on GBA Plus to assess. Certainly it's important in infrastructure to make sure that we're having diverse groups of men and women and gender diverse people who experience our policies and our initiatives. So infrastructure is being very intentional on how we examine the GBA Plus model and how we apply it to our work. So the goal for our staff, and we've certainly had this conversation before, is how to understand how we take stakeholders of very different race, ethnicity, religion, age, mental or physical disability, and how they are affected by our policy. So we're doing that work ongoing in infrastructure. And Infrastructure's executive management team is committed to GBA Plus, having received training in January of this year. So, so our senior ministry staff are fully trained, and our framework is in draft form right now. It's being reviewed by our staff, and once that framework is complete, it's going to ensure that we have a consistent application ongoing in all areas of infrastructure, which is actually pretty big right now, and that we have that lens applied through the whole area. So certainly when we apply that to things like our future capital planning cycles, that's another area that the GBA Plus is important for us. We had 6 submissions actually for that GBA Plus analysis had been done on. And those 4 of those 6 projects were funded through Seniors in Housing. So they actually included an affordable housing complex in Fort Saskatchewan under the Family and Community Housing Development and Renewal Program, another one in Slave Lake and in Whitecourt, and the Templemont Seniors Housing Development in Calgary under the Seniors Housing and Development Renewal Program. So certainly we're applying it within infrastructure and certainly on the projects that are being worked on. So it's a great lens through which to view the work we do.
Great.
Yeah.
A little bit off of GBA Plus, but in terms of the UNDRP, DRIP, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, do you have members of your staff that have been trained or educated to do their work with that lens?
So that is another area that is extremely important to us in the work we do. So infrastructure continues to support the UNDRIP mandate. And we've been supporting projects that directly impact life in Indigenous communities. That's both on and off reserve. So we have a courthouse renewal project to replace existing courthouses. And the scope of this project, it includes 2 courthouses on reserve and others off reserve that provide service to both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. And we also have the Peerless Trout First Nation school construction that is delivering a K-8 school to Peerless Lake and the K-12 school to Trout Lake. So we support Indigenous relations through involvement with our Indigenous relations work on the First Nations and Métis settlement consultation process. So certainly when it comes to having those conversations, I know, our Indigenous Affairs Minister and I sit down regularly and have conversations about how we each do our work in conjunction with the other.
Okay, thanks. I want to jump to the fiscal plan for a couple of minutes. Sure. I have some questions about page 66. So under schools, you've got a modular classroom program. And in my writing, the high school is John Diefenbaker High School.
Right.
And they share the space with the Chinese Academy. So the Chinese Academy is located in Chinatown, down Center Street from my writing. And every Friday night, the principal and the staff collect all of their materials and they put it in a few vehicles and they drive it up to Diefenbaker and they unpack everything. Then Saturday, they teach upwards of 2,000 students from across the city. And Friday, after classes are done, they pack everything back up in boxes and they put it back in their vehicles and they take it back down to their offices. And they've been asking over and over and over again for a portable to be located on the site of Diefenbaker to be able to store their materials. Diefenbaker is bursting at the seams. Yeah, I know it's number 1 on the next year's capital plan for the CBE.
Right.
But I would love to see, as part of some kind of program, some space for them. They do amazing work, and for them to be able to store their materials at the school would make a huge difference for them.
I agree. Education sets the priorities for modulars, and so infrastructure takes its cue from education when it comes to those priorities. So we would follow our lead from them, but certainly we are happy to have that conversation with the Education Ministry and to pass that along for you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
And then something that was brought up earlier was the Royal Alberta Museum So what's happening with the old property?
So one of the great things about Edmonton is we've got a lot of folks here with a lot of great ideas about what should be done with that property. I just sat down with folks from Edmonton Heritage last week when I was out doing some site visits, and we have a lot of folks, different cultural groups and community groups who really want to have input into what they think that space should be. One of the things I've heard over and over again is that people are actively interested in that site in Glenora and what it could be. I actually put out, I think it was a couple of months ago now, maybe it was 3 months ago, on social media, a request for ideas from people about what they thought the space should be. So we took ideas on our website. I believe we had people contact us on our website as well. And so we got a tremendous number of ideas from the public who really wanted to talk about that. I've heard, the folks from Edmonton Heritage made it very clear to us, and certainly this is a conversation that we've had a number of times, that they really believe that we should have a detailed examination of our buildings and not rush out to try and remove buildings, and when we have an opportunity to really honor our heritage. And I think, certainly the old Ram in its spot, right by Government House, has a really special place in a lot of people's hearts. And in the conversations that we had, certainly with people here in Edmonton and even beyond Edmonton, because there are lots of people who come from other parts of the province and remember back to their childhood, visiting that site, visiting Government House and visiting the old Ram. So I certainly am very open to that conversation. One of the things I said to Edmonton Heritage was, bring me your ideas. A lot of people have talked about, say, for instance, the idea of an Indigenous cultural center. And to do something like that in Edmonton. So I know some folks are putting together some ideas there, but we've had certainly a lot of interest from the public in what they thought we should re-envision that space to be. There are also some really interesting architectural details and some amazing pieces of stonework inside that building, and it would really be a shame to lose all of that. So we're going to listen really carefully to the community. They really want to be able to really flesh out what they think that space should be, and we want to listen carefully to that.
Right now there's no concrete plan for it?
No, we have certainly some...
I just want to move on.
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
have a lot of time.
Of course.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
And one of my
Interrupt at will.
And one of my earliest memories was going there, for sure. On page 63 of the fiscal plan, near the bottom, there's two items: one, information management and technology enterprise planning priorities,
right,
and one, management technology enterprise priorities. Now, I'm assuming that the difference in the terms, even though it's using the same acronym, is just a typo. Is that right? Because it looks like the first item is for planning, whereas the second one is either for implementation or operation of that.
Sorry, you're referring specifically to...
Page 63.
Page 63,
yep,
down near the bottom.
Yep, the last two lines.
You have, we have one information management technology, IMT,
and then
one
management technology.
Okay, so that's
I think it's
two
a typo
items here.
Because they have the same acronym.
Yeah. Right. And actually, nope, they are two separate pieces.
Okay.
So one, information management and technology, IMT, the enterprise planning priorities. It's part of Service Alberta.
Okay.
They were given the responsibility to provide oversight and governance to a number of IMT programs and projects across the government. So that was consolidating funding.
Oh, okay.
So the second piece, one, management technology enterprise priorities,
yep,
was used to develop new software programs and to refresh the existing IT and software for a number of programs in Alberta. And that includes capital projects under the $5 million threshold.
Okay.
So those are two pieces.
Okay, because when I read that, what I assumed it was an enterprise resource management system, but that doesn't sound like what it is.
No,
it sounds
so-
like it's more encompassing.
Right. So the first part was achieving efficiencies in capital spending on information technologies, continuing to work with ministries to define and determine the dependencies of various programs, and then the second piece was developing new software. So that was the difference between the two pieces.
Okay, and then there was one other line on there.
Hesitate to interrupt, but we will move on to